Today we're going to talk about zero and negative exponent rules. Whenever we have 0 as an exponent, a non-zero number raised to the 0 power is always 1. If you would put any number you can think of in the calculator to the 0 power, it will always equal 1. So we can use that to simplify different expressions. For example, this one is 4x to the 0 power. X to the 0 power is 1, so this is like 4 times 1, which is just 4. So we can simplify whenever we have a 0 power, we can get rid of it and just end up with a more simplified answer. This one, this whole thing, negative 5x, is to the 0 power, so the answer is just 1. I don't need to worry about multiplying by negative 5 because this whole thing, when it's in parentheses, is to the 0 power. This one, I see y is to the 0 power. Everything else I can't simplify, so I keep 3x to the 5th z squared. And if this just turns into a 1, if I would multiply this times 1, it stays the same. So we can almost think of 0 exponents like they just cross off, because when we multiply by 1, it doesn't change anything. Notice this has a parentheses with the negative. When there is not parentheses with a negative, it is really only doing this number to the 0 power. It's not doing negative. It's doing the 0 power and then multiplying by a negative. So this part would become 1, and then there's a negative, so our answer to this one is negative 1. Number 5, I see this big fraction with stuff going on inside, but it doesn't matter. I see a 0 exponent over here. The whole thing simplifies to just 1. And number 6, a little more complicated. I see an x to the 0 power and a z to the 0 power. Again, if it turns to a 1 and I multiply this times 1, it's not going to change anything. So I can basically just cross them off, because if I multiply by 1, it doesn't change anything. So we get negative 2 y to the 5th over 13. And that is how we simplify with 0 exponents. When we have negative exponents are not allowed. We never want our final answer that's simplified to have a negative exponent. To make a negative exponent positive, we have to move it to the opposite side of the fraction. Now I say opposite side of the fraction because it's not always going to be moving to the bottom, not going to always be moving to the top. It depends on where the negative is. So let's look at examples. This one I see 2 to the negative 2nd power, so that needs to go to the bottom of a fraction, 2 to the positive 2nd power. And if I don't have anything on top of a fraction, we can't leave it blank, we just put 1. When I have a number, we can go ahead and simplify further and say 2 squared is 4. So we get 1/4 when we have 2 to the negative 2nd power. This one, notice there's not parentheses, so x is the only thing that has a negative, not 2yx, just the x. So 2y is going to stay just like it is, but x to the negative 3 needs to go to the bottom of a fraction to turn into a positive 3. Number 3, since there are parentheses, this entire thing has a negative exponent. So the whole thing, 3uv, needs to go to the bottom to have a positive 2. So put a 1 on top if we have an empty fraction. 1 over 3uv squared. Number 4, I have a negative exponent on the bottom. If it's on the bottom already, we need to move it to the top to become positive. So the x squared stays because it doesn't have a negative, and the y squared is now going to be on the top with it. If I move it to the top, I have nothing left on the bottom, so I don't even have a fraction anymore, and that's okay. We don't have to have fractions. Number 5, there are 2 negative exponents. This one will need to go to the top this one will need to go to the bottom. So basically they just switch places. Y to the positive 4th and x to the positive 7th. Number 6, we have y to the negative first power needs to move down. And I also see a 0 exponent here. We just talked about 0 exponents are just 1. 10 times 1 stays as 10, so I can just cross this off and pretend it's not there. 6x squared stays up top. 10 stays on the bottom, and I also bring down y to the first. Whenever an exponent is 1, we don't need it, and we can just leave our answer like that. Number 7, when we have an entire fraction to a negative power, we just flip the fraction. We have the reciprocal. So 2z to the 5th over xy squared, and technically that would be to the first power, making that positive. But we just said that if there's a positive 1 exponent, we don't need exponent of 1 because that doesn't change anything. Last one. I see negative exponent here. Negative 9 is a number, it's not an exponent. So negative 9 is okay. That doesn't, just because a number is negative does not mean it needs to move to the bottom. Only negative exponents. So x to the 5th will be on the bottom. Y to the 6th will stay up top. I only move the part that is negative. So just remember that when we have 0 exponents, the answer is 1. When we have negative exponents, we have to move them from the top to the bottom or the bottom to the top.